Phantasm. Is it a nightmare? Phantasm. Is it an illusion? Phantasm.
Phantasm is a film from 1979 that blends together the genres of horror, science fiction, and fantasy into a surreal, nightmarish dreamscape. It was written, directed, and edited by a man named Don Coscarelli. He's made a lot of interesting, creative movies over the years, but Phantasm was his breakthrough and what he's best known for. The story is about an alien named the Tall Man who, under the guise of being an undertaker, steals dead bodies and transports them back to his own world to use as his dwarf slaves. This is a movie that was made on a very low budget of about $300,000. It took about 2 years to produce, and while the inexperience of the cast and crew and the low budget are very apparent in the film, it also has a very quaint and ambitious nature that shines through. And this is seen throughout much of the cinematography, the choreography of many of the sequences, and just the overall depth of how the themes of the movie are portrayed through its unique brand of visual storytelling. So the story goes like this. There are 3 friends, Mike, Jody, and Reggie. Mike is Jody's younger brother. At the start of the film, their friend Tommy is mysteriously murdered in a cemetery. Jody asks Mike to stay at home for the funeral, as their parents have recently died, and Jody doesn't want Mike to have to re-experience that trauma so soon. Mike, being the curious and rebellious child that he is, goes against Jody's wishes and secretly appears at the funeral to observe. And while he is observing the procession, he sees the Undertaker lift Tommy's casket out of the ground all by himself and load it into the hearse. I love the setup that this opening scene has because it shows us a few things. On the surface, it introduces us to all of our main characters and our main location, which is the morgue. But it also sets up the surreal, dreamlike tone that the movie is so known for, while also conveying the lens at which we're going to view this story through. At its core, this movie is about death, and it's a portrayal of the denial that we go through, especially in our dreams, of overcoming death. And so this moment at the start of the film shows us how we're going to be following Mike's journey on understanding and accepting what death is at such a young age, while also setting up the tone of how this world is going to work. Take, for example, this scene where Mike encounters the Tall Man walking down the main street of his town. Notice how the logic of this scene flows just as a real dream would. Mike is taking a stroll through downtown, no doubt a familiar location to him. Suddenly he turns to find 2 seemingly disconnected but familiar faces, one being his friend Reggie and the other being the Tall Man. His pace down the street is methodical and constant, very much like in a nightmare. Like the Grim Reaper himself, he is moving as an unstoppable force, yet at the same time, his long limbs effortlessly glide back and forth as if they're weightless. He comes to a halt behind Reggie, and since this is Dream World, Reggie doesn't notice the towering presence behind him as he continues his activities. So much of this film is about the fear of death and overcoming it. But the brilliance of it is that since it's told through the perspective of such a young boy, we're able to tackle these themes without the weight of the subject ever getting too dark or too overbearing.
Oh, shit.
Now, as the story progresses, Mike becomes deeper and deeper entrenched in the devious acts of the Tall Man. And because of this, Mike looks to his older brother Jody to help him out. This adds another layer to the fear of death and loss theme in the film, as not only does Mike have to worry about Jody being in danger from the Tall Man, but we also have this subplot of Jody feeling like he can't take care of Mike, since their parents have passed, and that he needs to move on from the past as well, leaving Mike behind. So because of this, there's this really interesting chemistry between Mike and Jody, where Jody is the reluctant brother who wants to detach from Mike, but also can't help but give in to his love for his younger brother in helping him out and caring for him. While at the same time, Mike looks up to his older brother and wants him to help, but also has this fear of losing him in addition to his parents. And this great chemistry is not only seen between Jody and Mike, but also with the character of Reggie. This movie takes a lot of time showing us the chemistry between these three characters and puts a lot of effort into its pacing with spreading out the scarier scenes with a lot of these more heartwarming, authentic character interactions. It can even get goofy and silly at times, which brings a very welcome levity given the intensity and darkness of the subjects that this film is trying to explore.
What the heck?
Building off the topic of characters, I want to discuss a bit more about the villain of the film, the Tall Man. This character is played by a man named Angus Scrimm, who was a classically trained theater actor.
Hello, I'm Angus Scrimm. Some time ago, word reached me that a gifted young filmmaker with whom I'd worked previously had a role for me in a new film.
Angus Scrimm was such a kind, soft-spoken man, and I think that those traits lend themselves well to him playing such a reserved character. His presence in the film is quite calm and reassured, while at the same time it's so imposing and threatening, which is of course aided by his physical appearance. His gloomy figure, that scowl, and of course his towering height. His portrayal of the Tall Man turns death into such a fun and scary villain.
You think you go to heaven? You go to us.
Everything about this character is so iconic, and for me, he is the best part of the film. So, the Tall Man's earthly domicile is, of course, the morgue, and this was a custom-built set. You've got these long white marble hallways with the only color being these red curtains draped from ceiling to floor. It really feels like a type of purgatory, like a transitionary realm before you enter the gates of hell. The last aspect of this movie that I'd like to discuss is by far the most iconic, and is what made me originally want to watch the film, and that is the flying balls. These balls essentially act as the Tall Man's security system within the morgue, and both the concept and practical application of these props are so inventive and ingenuitive. In order to make this effect work, they had multiple variations of segments of the ball for each particular shot. So, for example, when the prongs pop out, that was actually a semi-sphere with someone physically pushing the prongs through. And the same goes for the drill portion. For the part of the scene where the man's brains are being sucked through the ball, that was another fitment that they made, where the actor was holding a semi-sphere of the ball with a hose running down his sleeve. And this scene was deemed so graphic that originally the movie was going to be rated X, but somehow miraculously, the censors decided to grant it an R rating instead. And thank God for that, because this ended up being one of the greatest low-budget horror films of all time. It's a film I hold near and dear to my heart, and I'm happy to have been able to talk about it with you today.
Phantasm is here for your enjoyment. You will be seeing a film that holds a very special place in countless hearts. And know that as you watch, the Tall Man will be watching with you. Just behind you there, in the shadows.
That's all for our show today. Join us next time when we discuss